Before getting into prehistoric painting, I want to talk about some of their methods and how they're doing this. After all, it's our history class, and maybe the technique is going to be helpful to you at some point. So, where do we find these paintings within caves? We generally find them deeper within the cave than what we would otherwise expect. Oftentimes, you have the entrance, and then we're going to find a lot of pieces. This is Lascaux, further back in the cave. Oftentimes, this is thought to mean that it has a spiritual element to it, as if it took bravery or some kind of quest to follow these caves. And there are very narrow sections, so it would have been a harrowing experience potentially, and is one of many possibilities for why these were made. We do see paintings both high up on ceilings, but also low near the floor, frequently quite a ways into the cave. And you would see something like this. I mean, there are drawings all over the place here. Some of them are a little less obvious than others. And they would have been painting in the dark. Now, they had fire, so they would have been able to illuminate the area with fire if necessary. So it's not entirely impossible for them to be doing this in a darkened cave. We do find soot and other things that would indicate that that is fairly common. In terms of paints, they're generally using yellow ochre and red ochre, chalk and charcoal, which we talked about with the Venus of Willendorf. And all of these are water soluble. So chalk is basically limestone. It would have been commonly available in many of these caves. The charcoal, of course, coming from fires. The red and yellow ochre, they're finding. So you would find a stone that is primarily made up of iron oxide, and that becomes your red color. You grind it with some kind of water or spit in some cases, and basically create that paint. In terms of application, there's a number of different processes that we see. One of the coolest is basically an airbrush technique where they would take a bowl of the paint and they would use two reeds or straws to basically blow the paint at a surface. And we will see that shortly as we move through the material. But it is an enlightening idea that someone came up with this and went, hey, this is a pretty cool thing. You can only imagine what it would have taken to develop it. They use brushes as well. These are very simple brushes, so some kind of feather or some kind of fur, oftentimes could be some kind of straw or flax or some other material that is going to be tied to a stick of some form and used to apply the material. When they're drawing, they would have drawn with charcoal frequently, but any of these materials could be used. The red ochre can be used like a chalk. Of course, white chalk can do exactly the same thing. And we believe that they had simple forms of scaffolding, something lashed together like this, or maybe something more along these lines, where you have tree trunks that have been stripped off or found this way and that they're using as primitive, very basic ladders. The idea of getting high up is not that complex, and yet it tends to throw people off. They go, well, how did they get up there? Well, how do we do it today? Sticks and some sinew, which you're using, for example, bison intestine as sinew, would have worked incredibly effectively.